She was a judge, a woman standing firm in a land ruled by cruel oppression and fearsome iron chariots. Yet the fate of an entire nation did not depend on mighty armies or powerful weapons of war, but on her voice. It was spoken beneath the shade of a humble palm tree when deep darkness held the land in its grip and the terrifying roar of iron chariot wheels struck paralyzing fear into every beating heart of the people. Hope seemed all but lost to the crushing weight of despair, but God raised up Deborah, a mother of Israel who wielded no physical sword, yet whose unshakable faith moved entire armies into the heat of battle. She walked unshaken into the face of war, knowing with absolute certainty that the fight was not hers to win by strength, but belonged to God alone. And this is the extraordinary story of courage against all odds. It is a tale of unshakable faith and the unstoppable power of God working through the most unexpected vessel. A story in which the ultimate glory of victory would go not to a king, but to a woman. The land of Israel was in deep trouble again after the death of Ehud, the judge who had delivered Israel from Moabite oppression, and the people began to drift dangerously away from the protected ways of the Lord. The tragic cycle that had happened so many times before repeated itself once again. Prosperity led to spiritual complacency, and that complacency led them down the dark and treacherous path of idolatry. They turned their backs on the God who had miraculously brought them out of Egypt and began to worship the false gods of the Canaanites, bowing down to Baal the storm god and Asherah, the fertility goddess. They thought these false gods promised rain for their crops and fertility for their flocks, but in return, these gods demanded a terrible loyalty that drew Israel's heart far away from the Lord their God. God, in his righteous judgment, allowed Israel to be oppressed as a harsh wake-up call, and this time he gave them into the hands of Jabin, the king of Canaan, who reigned in the fortress of Hazor. Hazor was a powerful fortress city in the northern region, and its ruins today still speak of its once great walls and palaces, a testament to the might of the enemy that held God's people in captivity. Jabin's military commander was Sisera, a ruthless general with a terrifying advantage that no Israelite could match. 900 iron chariots that dominated the plains and crushed any rebellion. In those days, iron chariots were like tanks on the battlefield. They were fast, unstoppable on open ground, and deadly in battle, striking fear into anyone foolish enough to stand against them. The Canaanites used them to terrorize the Israelite tribes, attacking farmers in their fields, burning villages to the ground, and demanding heavy tribute that left the people starving and destitute. For 20 long and painful years, Israel suffered under Jabin's cruelty. This was the heavy price of idolatry, as the God who had brought them out of Egypt allowed them to feel the weight of disobedience. But a remnant still prayed in the darkness.
Give us strength in
Their
these dark
voices
times.
rose like incense toward heaven, crying out for deliverance from the crushing yoke of Canaanite rule, waiting for God to remember his covenant. Far to the south in the hill country of Ephraim, between the towns of Ramah and Bethel, there lived a remarkable woman named Deborah, who sat under her palm tree listening to the voice of God. She was not only a prophetess, one who spoke the inspired words of God, but also a judge of Israel, a leader raised up to guide the nation when there was no king on the throne to direct them.
The water is mine.
You shame your
Unlike the kings of other nations, the judges of Israel were not crowned rulers born into royalty. They were
Our
raised
help
up by
comes from
God
the
to
one who
lead,
made the heavens.
deliver, and
Have
guide the
faith,
nation through
and
times
victory
of
shall be yours
spiritual
this
and
very
physical
day.
crisis. People came to them for decisions, disputes, and counsel, and Deborah held court under a palm tree that came to be known throughout the land as the Palm of Deborah, a seat of justice in a lawless time.
To the
Day
hills,
after day,
messenger. Warn
men
the
and
others,
women
and
came
assemble
from
the
all
army by
over
the river
Israel to
Kishon.
have their disputes settled and to seek her counsel, for they knew she spoke with a wisdom that was not of this world, but from above. Her judgments were fair. Her words carried the weight of divine authority. And the people trusted her because they saw that the Spirit of the Lord rested upon her in a way that was undeniable. Deborah had
commands you,
something
go,
rare for that time.
Lead your men to Mount
She was a
Tabor.
woman with both
He will give you
spiritual
victory over
authority
your enemies.
and national influence in
Go,
a
Sid.
world where men
The
were
Lord
usually the
and
unquestioned
commands you.
leaders in public and military life.
Look there,
Deborah stood
to
out
Mount
like a
Tabor.
beacon of hope. Her strength
That is the
didn't come
path
from
we are
physical
called to take.
force or military might, but from
Move
her
down to the
unshakable
plain.
trust in
The Lord will
God
deliver
and her
Sisera into your
ability
hand.
to hear his voice clearly amidst the noise. One day, the word of the Lord came to Deborah with a specific plan for Israel's deliverance, a command that would set in motion a series of events to break the power of Jabin and his general Sisera. She
Do not
sent
be
for
afraid.
Barak,
The Lord
the
will go
son of
before you.
Abinoam from the tribe
We
of
must trust in
Naphtali,
his strength,
who lived in
not our
Kadesh
own.
in the far north, calling him to come down to her palm tree to receive the marching orders from God Almighty.
Go,
When Barak
for the Lord will
arrived,
deliver Sisera
Deborah
into your
spoke
hands
with the
today.
authority
I will
of
go,
God's
but know
command.
this,
The
honor
Lord,
will not be
the
yours.
God of Israel,
If
commands
you go with
you,
me, I
go.
will go.
take with
But
you
if you do not go with
10,000
me,
men from the tribes
I
of
will not
Naphtali
go.
and Zebulun.
We
Lead them up to Mount Tabor, she continued, and I will lure Sisera, the commander of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his troops to the Kishon River and give him into your hands.
go,
Barak
for
knew
the
the
Lord will deliver
extreme
the enemy
danger of
into
this
your hand.
command.
But the
To
path
face
ahead is
Sisera's
perilous,
army
and the
with its
glory will not be
900
yours.
iron chariots on open
As the sun
ground
sets
was
on this
almost
era,
suicidal
know that
for
the
an
promise
infantry
made under
force
this
with
very
inferior
palm will be
weapons and
fulfilled.
armor.
The Lord commands you.
But Deborah's words were clear and uncompromising. This was God's battle plan, not a human strategy, and it required a leap of faith that defied all military logic and instincts of self-preservation. He replied with hesitation, "If you go with me, I will go. But if you don't go with me, I won't go," revealing his dependence on her connection to God rather than his own confidence in the mission. Some see Barak's words as a sign of weakness or lack of faith, while others see it as a recognition of Deborah's unique role as God's spokesperson, acknowledging that he needed God's presence. Her presence meant God's presence and guidance to him. Either way, Barak wanted Deborah beside him on the battlefield, trusting in her spiritual
I know,
sight
Deborah.
more than his
We are
own
ready.
military capability. Deborah agreed to his condition, but she gave him a prophetic warning. "Certainly I will go with you, but because of the course you are taking, the honor will not be yours in this victory." For the Lord will deliver Sisera into the hands of a woman, she declared, a prophecy that would twist the expected narrative of war and glory in a way Barak could never have anticipated. It was a strange prophecy in the warrior culture of ancient Israel and Canaan, where the highest honor was to defeat and kill the enemy's commander, a feat that brought eternal fame to the victor. To be told that this ultimate honor would go not to Barak, the commanding general, but to a woman was unexpected. Yet he trusted God's plan through her and prepared to mobilize the troops. Barak sent messengers through the hill country, calling warriors from the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali, rallying them from their hiding places to fight for the freedom of their oppressed nation. From the hills and valleys, farmers laid down their plows, shepherds left their flocks, and fathers kissed their families goodbye, gathering whatever weapons they could find to join the rebellion. They marched toward Mount Tabor, a steep, rounded mountain rising majestically from the Jezreel Valley, a natural fortress that would serve as the staging ground for the impossible battle ahead. Mount Tabor was a strategic choice. From its heights, they could see the surrounding plains and valleys, including the route Sisera would inevitably take with his fearsome iron chariots. It was here on these slopes that Barak gathered 10,000 men with Deborah at his side, a massive force of infantry waiting for the signal to descend into the valley of death against the chariots. Meanwhile, word reached Sisera that Barak had mustered an army at Mount Tabor, and confident in his military superiority, Sisera summoned all his forces to crush the Israelite uprising. He gathered his 900 iron chariots and countless foot soldiers, marching from his base in Hareseth Hagoyim toward the Kishon River, prepared to wipe the Israelites off the map once and for all. Deborah, Barak, and the Israelite warriors stood on Mount Tabor, watching the dust rise from Sisera's advancing army, the valley below trembling with the rumble of chariot wheels and shouting soldiers.
Please, I beg you.
Then Deborah gave the signal, her voice cutting through the tension.
Very tired.
Go. This is the day the Lord has given Sisera
Come, my lord,
into your
come
hands.
right in.
Has not the Lord gone ahead of you into the battle? Barak led his 10,000 men, charging down the slopes of Mount Tabor into the valley, abandoning the high ground to meet the enemy on the plain, a move that seemed tactically insane. Normally, this would have been a disaster for the Israelites. The chariots could easily cut down infantry on open ground, mowing them over with speed and iron blades. But God had a surprise in store. According to the Song of Deborah in Judges chapter 5, the heavens opened, storm clouds gathered instantly, and a torrential rain began to pour down upon the battlefield with divine fury. The once firm ground of the valley floor turned to thick, sucking mud in minutes, and the Kishon River, swollen by the sudden deluge, surged violently, washing over its banks and flooding the plain. Sisera's iron chariots, the pride and terror of his army, became useless traps. Their heavy wheels sank deep into the mire, unable to maneuver or retreat in the chaotic sludge of the battlefield. Horses struggled and panicked. Warriors clung desperately to their mounts, and what had been a force of fearsome strength became a trap, chaotic mass of iron and flesh, vulnerable to attack. Meanwhile, the Israelite warriors pressed forward with courage and precision, unhindered by heavy armor or chariots, striking with fierce determination as the rain lashed against their faces. Their hearts were steady and full of faith, for they saw the hand of God fighting for them. Confusion spread through the Canaanite ranks, and the once fearsome army broke and fled in panic. The Lord himself fought for Israel that day. The enemy's power crumbled into the mud, and Israel's deliverance was complete, a dramatic testament to God's sovereignty over nature and nations. But the story wasn't over. Amid the chaos of the rout, Sisera saw that the battle was lost, and abandoning his stuck chariot, he fled on foot away from the slaughter toward the hills. He ran toward the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, for the Kenite were descendants of Hobab, Moses' brother-in-law, and they lived in peace with the Canaanites at that time. Heber had even made an alliance with King Jabin, and for that reason, Sisera believed Jael's tent would be a safe place to hide from the pursuing Israelites who were slaughtering his men. Jael came out to meet him, her manner calm and welcoming. "Come, my lord, come right in. Don't be afraid," she said, ushering the exhausted and terrified general into the sanctuary of her tent. She covered him with a blanket to hide him and gave him milk to drink when he asked for water. Exhausted from the battle and the flight, he drank deeply and felt a false sense of security. Believing he was safe, Sisera asked her to stand guard at the door and tell anyone who came looking that he was not there. And then he fell into a deep, heavy sleep born of pure exhaustion. But when Sisera had fallen into that deep sleep, Jael moved with quiet purpose. She took a tent peg and a hammer, tools that women in her nomadic culture were skilled in using daily. Yet in her hands, these domestic tools became weapons of war. Step by careful step, she crept toward where Sisera lay under the blanket, the tension in the tent thick enough to cut with a knife. With one swift, decisive blow, she drove the tent peg through his temple into the ground. The blow was final, and the oppressor of Israel, the commander of the iron chariots, died by the hand of a woman. Moments later, Barak came running in pursuit, seeking the enemy commander. Jael stepped out of the tent to meet him, her face calm and unreadable as she beckoned him to follow her inside. "Come," she said, "I will show you the man you are looking for." He entered the tent and saw Sisera lying dead with the tent peg through his temple, and he knew the prophecy was true. In that moment, Deborah's prophecy was fulfilled before his eyes. The glory of victory over the enemy's commander had indeed gone to a woman, just as the Lord had spoken through his prophets. That day, God subdued Jabin, king of Canaan, before the Israelites. The power of the oppressor was broken, and the people of Israel saw that their God was mightier than iron chariots. From then on, Israel grew stronger and stronger until they destroyed Jabin completely, removing the threat from their land and reclaiming their freedom to worship the God of their fathers. To celebrate the victory, Deborah and Barak sang a song, one of the oldest poems in the Bible recorded in Judges chapter 5, praising God for the storm, the volunteers, and the victory. For 40 years after this great deliverance, the land of Israel had peace, resting under the shade of God's protection and the wise leadership of Deborah, the mother of Israel who believed.
Remember,
Deborah's story is more than an ancient battle account. It pulses with truths that still speak to us today, reminding us that God's power is made perfect in weakness and unexpected choices. In an age when men held nearly all positions of public authority, God chose a woman to serve as judge, prophetess, and military leader, showing that his call is never bound by human expectations. Her courage flowed from her faith, and her faith produced action. Even Barak, hesitant at first, stepped forward in obedience, and God honored that step by giving them a miraculous victory. The victory they saw was not the result of superior weapons or greater numbers, but the Lord's intervention, turning the elements themselves against the enemy to save his people from destruction. And in the end, a tent-dwelling woman named Jael boldly stepped into history, fulfilling prophecy and bringing an unexpected end to Israel's enemy with the simple tool she had in her hand. Deborah's leadership reminds us that God often works through those the world overlooks. Villagers turned warriors, a woman in a male-led society, a wife with only the tools of her tent. In the same way, he works through ordinary believers today in workplaces, schools, homes, and neighborhoods to accomplish his purposes and bring light into the dark places of our world. Your quiet faithfulness may be the very thing God uses to bring deliverance, hope, and change to someone else's life. Just as Deborah's voice under the palm tree shifted the course of a nation. In every generation, God calls his people to trust him when the odds seem overwhelming. Our Sisera may not ride iron chariots, but challenges still loom large in our lives and culture. Cultural pressures that pull us from God, fears that keep us silent, and spiritual battles that seem unwinnable are our modern chariots. But the God of Deborah is still on the throne today. Like Deborah, we are called to stand firm in truth, speak courage into those around us, and move forward when God says go,
it's about leading
trusting
the way.
that he has already
The
gone
future of
ahead
this
of us
company
into the
starts
battle.
with the decisions we make right now.
Just as God fought for Israel against Sisera's army, he fights for his people now in battles seen and unseen, in victories large and small, for his hand is not too short to save.
It too.
That same hand still moves for his people today. The real question is this: will you trust him enough to step onto the battlefield, knowing that the battle ultimately belongs to the Lord? Your faith, like Deborah's, Barak's, and Jael's, may be the very instrument God uses to bring deliverance, hope, and change in your life and in the lives of those around you for his glory.